Moving right along in our agenda, let's move on to our run showcase. And for those of our guests, we do have 3 categories of presentations: how to run your business, tips on how to grow your business, and then that work-life balance, how to live, how to also have a successful business, but also live a high quality of life. But we're going to now start with our run showcase. And so I'm going to turn it over to our E3 partner, Dale Furtwengler. So Dale, you're up.
Thank you, Glenda. Will I need to have screen sharing?
Yeah, it's on, sorry.
Everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, today we're going to be talking about problems and solution. And in a study in contrast, each and every one of us is known as and admired for something that we do well. In my case, one of the comments I hear regularly is that I have a knack for getting to the heart of the issue quickly and crafting simple, effective solutions with equal alacrity. So when I hear comments from people frequently about things that I don't realize that I'm doing, it causes me to pause and think about, well, how did I get here? And that's the purpose of this presentation. So, as I thought about this, and I realized that there's really a contrasting style between identifying problems and crafting solutions. And with identifying problems, what I discovered is that what I look for are incongruities. In particular, I'm looking for differences between what people are saying and what they're doing, between the goals that they're setting and the results that they're getting. So I'm looking for the differences, the disparity between the two. So let me give you some examples to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here. Years ago, I had a prospective client for CFO services. And during the conversation, he told me that his mission was to become the most responsive in his industry, to get that reputation. And yet what he was finding is that he wasn't as profitable as he felt that he should be. Well, during the discussion, one of the things he told me is that somebody had called with a part order. It was a $9.95 part. They needed it overnight. He shipped it overnight and ate the delivery charge, which happened to be more than the price of the part. So it's pretty obvious what the problem was there. He was not looking at the economics as well as his goal of being the most responsive in this industry. Another example, I talked to a lot of CFOs over the years because I was one for a while. And it was amazing how often when a company got into cash flow problems, that the CFO would go to the collection department and say, well, we got to reduce the average age of our receivables. So I want you to drop it from whatever it is to by 3 or 4 days. But nowhere in that discussion did they say, oh, by the way, we'd like to retain the customer. And so the collection department would get more aggressive and the cash flow would improve. But all of a sudden, they're realizing they're losing customers in the process. And this, one of the things I found that is a source of a lot of the problems that exist is that we're creating one-sided, unbalanced goals, if you will. So if you look at these two examples, being the most responsive in the industry is a good goal, but it has to be balanced with the financial realities that exist in doing that. I also, in that discussion with him, found that this was not a long-time customer that he was doing to thank them for their continued business. This was somebody that just called in. So what he was in essence doing is encouraging people who weren't planning ahead and needed something urgently to not only get what they needed, but not have to pay for it. So that's not the kind of message you want to send. The same way with the cash flow problem. They were looking at improving the cash flow, but weren't looking at customer retention. So to give you an example of a balanced goal, a person that I know was head of the commercial HVAC service unit in a mechanical engineering firm had a 3-ring policy. If the phone in his department wasn't answered within 3 rings, he would rain grief on them in the form of a deluge, okay? And his rationale was that it was good for all parties. By answering within the 3rd ring, he was demonstrating that they really cared about the customer and were being responsive at a time when that customer was getting overrun by phone calls complaining about too much heat or too little heat or too little air conditioning. And by being responsive and giving them a time frame for when they could expect it to be repaired, that person was able to communicate that to the occupants of the building that they were the facilitator, the facilities managers for, and stop a lot of wasted energy responding to calls and not knowing what to say because you didn't have an answer yet. So it helped the customer. It helped his company because they were so responsive. They retained a higher percentage of business than was typical for the industry. And often they were able to retain it and not have to bid on that work. So they were able to get better margins as well. And that helps the employees because it provides a more consistent flow of work to keep the employees busy. And it also gives them the kind of profits they need in order to compensate their employees well. So there were no problems created with a policy like that. Where on the others, when there was only one side of the equation that was addressed, you end up a lot of problems. Now let's contrast that with crafting solutions. Crafting solutions just the opposite. Instead of looking for incongruities, we want to see commonality. And in particular, we want to see an alignment of values and goals. Because when we find that commonality of values and goals, we find the foundation on which we can build a really good solution. Absent that alignment, it's very, very difficult to get a solution. And again, let me offer some examples. I was on the board of a non-profit school that provided education for both typically developing and special needs kids from the ages of 6 weeks to 6 years. And the year prior, we had a double-digit tuition increase. And the executive director was adamant that she did not want to increase tuition again during the current year. At the same time, the treasurer of the organization wanted to have the parents sign up for automatic withdrawal to help keep the costs down on processing deposits and follow-up phone calls for collection and that sort of thing. And the executive director saw that as an additional imposition on the parents after they just suffered a double-digit tuition increase. What they weren't seeing is that they were both working toward the same end. The executive director had been working diligently to keep costs down in order not to have to raise the tuition again. And with the automatic withdrawal system, again, it was going to help keep costs down, but she wasn't seeing that, nor was the treasurer presenting it in that light. So on the board, when it was brought to their attention that there was a commonality there, they were both trying to keep costs down and keep from adding staff. Then we were able to frame the solution in the context, okay, we're going to go to the parents and tell them there's no tuition increase and we're working diligently to keep costs down. And they can help us in that regard by signing up for the automatic withdrawal system. So it's the commonality of their goals that made that solution possible. Okay, talking about unresponsive staff, the person I was talking about, who was the head of the HVAC there, very early in their career was a district manager for Carrier. And the person was an exceptional salesperson. Within 24 months of taking on the district manager role, he took his district from number 23 in the country to number 2. So an exceptional salesperson. Called me one day and said, you know, Dale, I sit down with my administrative staff each week and I tell them what we need to accomplish and why it's important, and I assign the tasks, and the following week I find that nothing's happened. And I go through it again and tell them what they need to do, why it's important, assign the task, and the following week nothing's happened. So I asked him, I said, well, do you tell your customers what to do? And he said, well, no. I said, well, why not? And he said, well, they have to discover it on their own. I asked him, why do you think your employees are any different? There's a commonality to our humanity that causes us to resist being told what to do. But when we're invited to come up with a solution, to share our knowledge and our wisdom and our experience in crafting a solution and accomplishing a goal, then we're much more likely to buy into it. So again, the commonality there was seeing the commonality between the customer's human nature and the employee's human nature. Now, one of the challenges in crafting solutions is that it's easier for us to see differences than it is to see similarities. And I don't recall the source of the statistic, and I'm not even sure exactly how accurate it is, but intuitively it made sense to me. The individual said that 95% of the population sees differences, only 5% see similarities. The good news is we can train ourselves to look for the similarities. We can train our minds to do that, and eventually, as we do that more and more frequently, it becomes a habit and it becomes our default way of thinking. So even though it may be a little more challenging in the beginning, it is something that we can develop as a skill, as a capability. Okay, and so really the contrast between problems and solution is that with problems, we're looking for incongruities. For solutions, we're looking for commonality. Okay. Now, I know that my purpose in creating this program was not to teach all of you how to become problem solvers, because I know all of you and I know all of you are exceptional in this regard. The reason I created this program was to create awareness of what you're really doing, because a lot of us do these things. We evolve these capabilities over time, and they become habits, and we lose sight of how we do that. But when we become aware of what it is that we're doing that enables us to be good at what we're doing, then we have the tools to be able to teach others. And that's really the purpose of this program, is to create awareness for you of what you're doing so that you can teach others how to become more effective problem solvers.